Good afternoon. Welcome to PCAP's annual Prairie's Got the Goods Week. My name is Caitlin Rose Seiler, and I'm the Stewardship Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP for short. Today, Art McElroy from Near Frontier, Saskatchewan, will be speaking about his experiences of being a rancher. Before we get going, I'd like to start by stating we respectfully acknowledge that we are in the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations and communities, past and present. For millennia, they have worked to protect these landscapes and the life these areas sustain. I'd like to thank these original caretakers and acknowledge the ongoing work and presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada today. I'd also like to mention that this week is the Prairie's Got the Goods week, and PCAP has two more webinars happening. Tomorrow is one about NCC, and then we have another one on Friday about cows, carbon, and grasslands. And we also have a coffee table conversation with Lynn Grant from the Val Marie area, and that's happening tomorrow. And as always, you can register for our webinars on the PCAP website, and recordings will be made available on the PCAP YouTube channel afterwards. And a reminder to our listeners out there, you'll be muted for the duration of the presentation. I've got a list of interview questions for Art, but if you have any questions for him too, feel free to type it into the Q&A section of the webinar dashboard at any time, and we'll try to get to them if we can. Lastly, Prairie's Got the Goods Week is presented by the Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association, North American Helium, Nutrien, and SaskTel. So without further ado, I will stop my screen share so we can see Art there. So Art, can you tell us a little bit about how you first got into farming and ranching?
Thank you, Caitlin, for inviting me to come on the podcast. The objective that I would like to leave with your listeners is I've got a lot of thoughts and ideas that have been rumbling around in my mind about our industry and our business that I'd like to share with people. And that is, I hope that will stimulate a lot of thinking about why we do what we do on our farms and our ranches. And you introduced me as a rancher, but I'm not really a typical rancher. Mm-hmm. And from that, I will just, I guess, introduce myself a little, if that's okay. First of all, I'm a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, and I have an incredible wife by the name of Leslie that has been my partner for close to 50 years. I have 9 children and now 12 grandchildren, and they are an immense blessing to Leslie and I. Very grateful for that. Caitlin, we moved from just east of Calgary at Sesame Lake, where I grew up, and got my formal education there working with an uncle. And we moved here when I was 44 years old. And this is a much harsher place to make a living in agriculture than it was there. And so we've had to learn a lot. I continuous cropped this country for 11 years. Mm-hmm. And in my farming career, I did my best to keep air seeder technology going round and round. We had 14 different air seeders, air drills, from the beginning to the end. And at the end of that time, I was 55 years old, and a few of those years of continuous cropping in this part of the world were okay, mm-hmm. But there were many that were not okay. But by the grace of God, we survived that. But I came to the conclusion through a lot of prayer that I needed to seed this whole farm to grass. And I had seeded maybe 500 or 600 acres to grass between 1996 and 2005. That I could see this land should never have been broken up, and the only reason it had been broken up was to get quota acres. Now, maybe you have no idea what quota acres are, but we have a thing called the Canadian Wheat Board, and that was a very frustrating organization to work with. But in 2005, I seeded 2,000 acres to grass each of those years, some to native species, some to tame species of grass. And operation. And I'd always had cattle, both cow calf and yearlings. But at that time, I also decided that if I was going to be serious about making a living with animals, there were two things I had to do. I had to learn how to graze properly, and I had to go and learn how to market animals, and also what proper stockmanship was. And I was 55 years old at the time, and I'll tell you, it's funny what we think we know, but yet we went and got some education. I spent three times in Texas with Bud Williams, learning both stockmanship and by marketing. And in 1998, what really got me launched, I guess, was I took a home study course with one of my oldest sons from Ranching for Profit. In those days, they had a home study course, and I did that. And then also in 2006, if I remember right, we took a holistic resource management course with Don and Bev. Can't remember the last names right now, but they were the ones that Campbell. I'm sorry, but they were the ones that got us launched really into proper grazing, proper financial management, how to plan for a profit, how to work towards a profit every year, and how to learn to work with Mother Nature. And I had been battling Mother Nature all my life, and I never won once. And it's funny that it would take so long for someone to learn, but praise God, I eventually got through my thick skull that you don't battle Mother Nature ever and win. So we've been on this journey now close to 20 years of strictly a grazing operation. I had a pile of machinery in my lifetime, about the air seeders, but today we have a front end loader and an old feed wagon that if we can add value to feed, we will purchase the feed. If we cannot add value to the feed, the cattle will go to a custom feed yard for the winter. And most of our animals have been in a custom feed yard this winter, and we're just bringing them home now, and we're starting grazing already. We've had 7 years of drought. Last year was not bad. We had 5 inches of rain during the growing season up to the 1st of July, and we grew a pile of grass, but we're understocked. And because in the middle of April, we sold most of our yearlings because I was running out of feed. I didn't have a reserve in the pasture, and we didn't know whether the drought was continuing. So I think that was very good, so that we gave all of our tame grasses and some of our native grasses a whole year of rest. And we can talk a little bit more about rest and grazing if you would like, but all of our cattle that we had were on a 3,200 acre grazing lease that we have that had been rested the year before. And so it had a full season of rest. And when I talk about rest, I mean rest during the growing season. I don't mean rest just because it doesn't have animals on it in January, but it's rest during the growing season. And we had incredible gains on those cattle on that native grass last year. And in my opinion, if we can't get gains on yearlings of 1.5 or up to 2 per year on grass grazing, then maybe they better stay in the feed yard, because they can put gain on cattle in the feed yard. But gain is very expensive, even on grass, if we don't get the gain. So grazing management is extremely important to us. I do have a son at home here right now and his family, which I'm very grateful for, because I would not be talking to you right now that I'm still a rancher if he was not here. And so I'm very grateful that my son Lee and his wife Kennedy that were willing to come home. And they came home at the beginning of the drought, which is the best time, Caitlin, to ever start in something when it's pretty tough. And so what this year will bring, we don't know. But
Yeah.
right now, I wouldn't say we're soaking wet. When I stick a probe in the ground right now, I can get it in the ground about 12 to 14 inches only. And I wouldn't say that that's much of a reserve of moisture. We got a little bit to get started on, but March is probably not the worst time to have a drought if you're grazing. But moisture in April and May is of vital importance for forages. Maybe the grain farmers don't like it, but we in the forage business, we have to get early moisture, and it has to be cool. Like last year was absolutely perfectly ideal because we had 2 inches of rain early in May, and then another 3 inches till the end of June, and it was cool. And so we grew that. And one thing about giving all of our forages rest last year, or the cane forages, is that we produced a pile of seed. It was just an incredible seed production year. And not only crested wheat, but meadow brome and alfalfa. And because of the drought, we were getting quite a bit of bare ground bare spots between our grasses. It rained 2 inches in September, Caitlin, and with the amount of seed that we had on the ground, it was just unbelievable, the amount of germination we've got. So we're looking forward to filling in quite a bit of this bare spots between our plants. I'll stop there, Caitlin, and let you ask me some questions now.
Well, first of all, you've said some really interesting things that I just want to kind of recap. So you moved to a farm near Frontier, Saskatchewan at the age of 44. You spent 11 years continuous cropping, and then at the age of 55, decided to seed it all back to grass, which is amazing. And then I think you said something about you've been fighting with Mother Nature for a long time, and I thought that was pretty powerful. But it seems that you've really figured it out. And we just had one comment from our attendees. They're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. So I might just ask you to move a little bit closer to the mic if that's okay. But we've already gleaned a lot of really awesome information from you, which is great. And I actually met you a year ago when you were kind of talking at a SODCAP AGM about seeding the land back to grass. Can you tell us again about how you did that, like how many acres you did, and just what kind of seed blend you used and that sort of thing?
Okay, in 2005 was the first year when we seeded most of it back to grass. At that time, I had a John Deere 1860 disc drill on 7.5-inch spacing. And there was probably not a more ideal machine to be able to seed forages with. We had quite tall stubble, maybe 12, 16-inch high stubble from the grain land from the previous crop. That machine could seed grass without any disturbance. It was just an amazing machine. If I had to go back grain farming, I would choose the disc drill. But I'm not going back grain farming because I sold all my machinery and all my bins, so I would never be tempted to go back grain farming ever again.
That's
and
great.
So that's what we seeded. And when we seeded our cane grasses, we seeded meadow brome, we seeded crested wheat, 2 different kinds of alfalfa, a creeping rooted and a tap rooted, and plus 2 native species, tall fescue, and now I'm drawing a blank on what the other one was. When we seeded the native grasses, there was 7 species in that mix. And the nitrogen fixer that I used there was Sizer milk vetch. And I'd like to tell you that was an overwhelming success, but the Sizer milk vetch is more for the black soil zones than the brown soil zone, I think. And even though we had some good moisture, that we didn't get enough of the nitrogen fixation in there. But in 20 years now, we got a very good catch of grass on every acre. It was just quite amazing. And because sometimes we struggle when we're feeding grass and you got to wait a while and take a while of patience. But that was an amazing strand of grass that we got. And I remember a few of those years driving through it with a quad, and the quad would labor because the grass was so heavy and thick. And and that's probably because we had good moisture. Maybe we had some fertility left over from our cropping, uh, and it was just a tremendous stand. And what we were doing in those early years, Caitlin, on all of this grass was mob grazing. And
Mob
I've learned
grazing.
from Neil Dennis, Wawota, Saskatchewan, about mob grazing. And we were putting 1,200 head of yearlings on 2.9 acres at a time and moving them maybe 6 to 7 times a day. And we did that for 5 years. And
Wow.
in our soil here, that is, it's lower quality ground. We're in the black soil zone, very low
Mhm,
organic matters, high
mhm.
magnesium. It's it's a struggle sometimes. And what we did by concentrating the manure, the urine, and we tramped so much of that grass down onto the ground, uh, and left it on the surface to start decomposing, to start to feed the soil biology. And we weren't into soil biology at that time, Caitlin, but we've learned a lot in 20 years now about what soil biology is, and that we need to look after the livestock we have below the ground with more care than we look after the livestock above the ground if we're going to make a living. And
That's
we're
pretty.
just learning that now. But at that time, we just tramped a pile of grass on the ground. It was really good for what our land did. We'd have some rainfall events at times that you'd get an inch of rainfall at night. They'd all stand in a corner in the in, and just turn it into black summer fallow. But we'd move them off of there the next day, and a year from then, you couldn't even tell what that black summer fallow was. We tramped so much of that material into the ground. We've had so many unbelievable experiments. And in order to do this mob grazing, Caitlin, we have 300 miles of electric fence. We have no, we are, all of our exterior fences, or almost all of them, have an electric fence around them. And there's one wire, hot wire down the middle of every quarter and half section. And underneath that wire is an inch and a half pipe buried 1 foot in the ground that we pump all the water to the cattle. So the water always goes to the cattle never go to the water. And so we would just keep moving these cattle on a constant basis. And I had the strength and the energy in those days to do that. And people would say, well, that's too intense. I don't have any time to do something like that. But at the same time, that's all I had to do. I wasn't making hay. I wasn't going to make hay. I didn't have 100 other things I had to do. And I had my sons at home at that time, and we put in electric fences like you couldn't imagine. Like the posts are only 100 feet or 100 feet apart. They're a little inch and a quarter of poly pipe, and with one wire. And it was simple. It was easy, and we hardly ever had cattle that tested that fence. For one thing, they were never hungry. They never had to
Mm.
test it.
Yeah,
And I've got the biggest charger you can buy to put juice in that fence, and they respected that fence incredibly. It was very, very simple. And the piece of string to divide all these pieces up is a piece of string with step-in posts, and it's all done off of a quad. And you could put up a fence and take it down, and every fence is a quarter mile because it's from the outside of the field to the inside, so it's a quarter mile. And
mhm.
we could put up a fence and take a fence down in 15 minutes.
Wow.
And of course, once you get those cattle trained and you're working with those cattle so much, it is such a pleasure to work with them. And with what we learned about stockmanship from Bud Williams, how to teach cattle to take pressure, how to be driven, uh, it was absolutely amazing. And one person, it's all it took to move cattle. If we had to move a mile or anything, these cattle just knew that every time they got moved, they were going to new grass. And we had to learn with the mob grazing how to make sure we were getting the pounds of gain every day. Because there's two things. There's either landscaping, that means tramping the grass down to feed the soil, or and if you really use the cattle for a lot of landscaping, then your rate of gain will suffer. So we had to learn how to balance that so that we were getting the rate of gain, but yet still getting the landscaping on the land that we needed and wanted. And that took us a while to learn that, but we accomplished that, and it's so fascinating to watch how our land has responded to this. And of course, the last number of years in the drought, down from 12 or 1,500 head, and some of those were owned cattle, some of those were custom grazing cattle, and the last 4 or 5 years, we've only had 400 or 500 head. And some of those years, we had to market those cattle in the middle of July. Wow. Because that we were out of grass, just that the quality of the grass was such that for a yearling, you couldn't put pounds on anymore. When crested wheat dries up in the middle of July, it's a great grass, but at certain times of the year, and we had to learn how to use crested wheat. So you have to have options with crested wheat. You have to have some native grass to move them to and various things. So it's been an incredible learning experience, and we're very grateful that the Lord was gracious to us and helped us survive through it all.
It's pretty amazing what you've been doing. And did I hear you say 300 miles of electric fence that you guys put in?
That's correct.
Holy smokes, unbelievable. And I just really
they're all just one wire. There's a few fields that we have 2 wires around, and that's so the neighbors can sleep at night. Not so I can sleep at night. Because these cattle respect the electric fence, and they never have to test the fence because they're ever hungry.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about the soil biology, that we need to look after the livestock below ground as we do above ground. I think that's really powerful and something to think about. We have a few people wondering about, are you still doing mob grazing now?
We are, but not as intensive, because,
okay.
Caitlin, if you don't have the large numbers, then it's not as economically viable to do it. So if it runs a little and we can go back to more numbers, then we will go back to more intensive. But at least a minimum of once a day is a move, never longer, because grass, after it's been grazed, starts to regrow within 3 days. So if you leave grass longer than 3 days, typically, and it starts to regrow, you know what they're going to go back and bite. And that's when we start pulling root reserve out of the roots to replenish the leaf. This is such an amazing system that we work with, because all ranchers and farmers are, Caitlin, is solar harvesters. That's all we are. We're in from the sun, and any sunlight, Caitlin, that falls on bare ground is wasted. We want all sunlight to fall on a leaf that can absorb that energy from the sun. That plant takes that energy, converts it into sugar, which it releases back into the ground to feed the soil biology. And that soil biology then in turn turns around and feeds the plant, which then in turn grows more leaves. And so as we begin to understand what we're working with and what continuous grazing does by continually biting that same leaf off over and over again, and never allowing the plant to experience full maturity, it doesn't need to experience full maturity every year, but every so often, it needs to experience full maturity to develop its root system and to produce a seed head. And once again, I'm never going to break this farm up and seed it ever again. It has to go to seed every now and again to replenish itself. The system that that we work in and that the good Lord created for us to use and to learn how to use is absolutely amazing. And you know what? We're only eating sun energy from the sun that was given through a plant, and we're producing the most high quality protein in the world through cattle, sheep, goats, camels, whatever. It shouldn't be any different what we use to graze with, but the system is absolutely amazing how we survive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If you could rewind the clock and go back to when you first moved to Saskatchewan, what would you do differently? Would you still do the continuous cropping for 11 years, or would you have seeded it to grass earlier, or is there anything you would have done differently?
I should have seeded it to grass the day I got there, Caitlin, but I wasn't there yet. And there's something between my ears that wasn't prepared, and I have prepared. But uh, you know, Gabe Brown says you have to earn the right to grow grass, and this ground had been mined for close to 100 years. When I came here, there was 0.5% organic matter in this land. It was dead. It had been mined out. Uh, between cropping and summer fallow for 100 years, it was mined out. And so, I poured the fertilizer to her and all the rest, and that's great if it rains. But when it doesn't rain, it it's hard on the pocketbook. But
Yeah.
so, you know, Gabe Brown says that you should, if you're going to seed forages back, you should go to cocktail crop mixes for at least 5 years and not harvest them, but have cattle on them in order to build. The only reason why is to build soil biology. Well, in 2005, at the research station in Swift Current, they were only starting to discover cocktail crop mixes and their benefit and their use. And I didn't do that. And so I think I've slowed the process down by not having the proper soil biology that I needed. And once again, it's a learning experience, all these different things. And but I would encourage people, if they were going to seed land back to grass now, well, go to a cocktail crop mix for a number of years and graze that in order to build soil biology. And I'm not going to start breaking ground up now to go to a cocktail crop mix to get soil biology, because this farm has not been tilled now for 29 years, and it's not going to be tilled while I'm alive. Maybe someday somebody else will. I don't know. They'll get the benefit of what we've done. But I trust that my grandchildren are now that are on this farm will continue to get the benefit because of what we're doing to enhance our soil and our environment. And I'd like to think that I've sequestered a pile of carbon in this day and age. And carbon's a terrible, terrible thing. But you and I breathe in air. We breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants take it in. Carbon dioxide to me is not a terrible thing, because my plants will continue to absorb that carbon dioxide and sequester it into the ground as long as I've got good, vigorous growth that I can sequester carbon. So I'm not feeling bad about driving an SUV around.
You mentioned that you have 9 children and 12 grandchildren. How do you get them involved with your operation?
Well, Caitlin, we home educated them all. They never went to school.
Okay.
I have 2 children with master's degrees, so I don't think we buggered them up too bad. All of my children are doing very well in their area of study and in their area of work. They all worked with me on the farm. My daughters were the best combine operators I had, better than my son. And when we finally got rid of the machinery and the farming, and a lot of my older children were growing up at that time, then my younger children learned livestock and grass. And my son that is home with me And maybe we raised them a little too independently. They all went off and pursued, they all have very, very good careers. And my son that's home with me came home 5 years ago or 6 years ago, he and his wife. And he never knew anything about farming. So I didn't bugger him up that way. And he's into the grass. He started a sheep operation here. So we're no longer mono grazing, because that's another thing. Monocropping is a problem, especially with soil biology. And mono grazing is not far behind it. So he's got sheep here now. And we need a lot more sheep before we're done, I think, because, and we've got lots of wildlife here now. So it's, we don't want anything in singular, like monocropping or mono grazing. We want as many species as possible in order to enhance our grass, our grazing, and to help the soil biology. And so, all our children, I tried to send them to as many things as possible in life to get them educated. I went to Olds College and I spent a year and a half there, and they never taught me about soil biology. I took a soils course, but all it was how to squeeze more bushels per acre every year out of it, or how to produce more pounds of calf. But they never taught us the point of diminishing returns. Whereas, yes, you can get more, and gross is great, but net is better. What's left over after the growth? And so, you know, we have big calves in the fall, but do they net as much money as calves that are born in June, along with Mother Nature, when their mothers are on grass and there's no scours on the grass? And the labor requirements to have a cow out. And so, you know, as we began to look at all these things, I had cow calf for quite a number of years, well, all till about 10 years ago. But when the price of feed got too expensive, I didn't want to be buying feed to maintain a cow. If I was going to buy feed, I wanted to put pounds on a calf that I was being paid for. And, you know, we did many different things with the cows. So we bought smaller bulls to try and downsize the size of our cows. The year BSE hit, I switched to June calving because I thought, well, I could have gone to May calving, but I thought, well, the cow will need my help. Well, the cow doesn't want my help. And we spent 10 or 12 years with June calving. And those calves stayed on their mothers until April of the following year. And a number of those years, and where we live, Caitlin, of course, there's advantages and disadvantages. One of them is that we can winter graze a long time. But in order to winter graze, you've got to preserve grass. And when we were grazing these cows in the winter time, and we were still grazing them, I was feeding a mineral that had feed grade urea in it to boost the protein of what they were eating, so that we were feeding the bacteria in the rumen to digest high cellulose material that they were grazing in the field. And I was moving a spring every 3 days to move those cows in the winter. And they weren't happy cows. I went to 1 day a move, and they turned into very happy cows. And they did very well. And they were nursing a calf through till April every year. So can you imagine what that was doing to my cost of production? Now, we weren't getting a lot of growth on those calves per pound, but they were with their mothers. They were extremely happy. There was no sickness. And they were getting a little bit of very, very high quality milk every day, butter fat, that was boosting their protein. And when they hit the green grass in the spring with compensatory gain, those calves just really pop. And so when we learn what it costs to run a cow, and with later calving, with, you know, the extra feed requirements in that third trimester, and then extra feed again the moment of calving in order when they start lactating and producing milk. When we started looking at what our costs were to run a cow, it was, we just realized that we had to continue working with Mother Nature. And I don't see any animal born in March or April, to be quite honest with you. And to go to that later calving and to smaller cows, because we can run more cows per acre. Everything that we do has to go back to a per acre cost, because our land is our most expensive input. And we could run more cows, more smaller cows, and I'm talking maybe going from a 1,400 pound cow to maybe an 1,100 pound cow. We could run more of them on every acre because everything eats 3% of its body weight per day, and we could produce more total pounds of beef per acre by going to a smaller cow and running more of them. And cows that were used to looking after themselves rather than the first blizzard come along and standing at the gate waiting for you to haul feed to them. Because the two biggest costs on a cow are our winter feed bill and depreciation. Right now, we have no depreciation on a cow, or very, very little. But we still have the winter feed bill, and it's tremendous. And the latest statistics I heard out of the University of Missouri in American dollars, it was between $1,300 and $1,400 to run a cow for a year. And you convert that into Canadian dollars, maybe a $2,000 calf maybe isn't that great after all. So what are we going to do when prices go back down like they did after 2014 and 15? They tanked.
Yeah,
so to
right.
look at our costs, Caitlin, are just amazing. And you asked me the question about my kids, and now we went down this other rabbit trail. But it was just such a blessing to work with my children, to have them on the farm, and now to have my grandchildren come. They just love it here. And who knows what the future will hold, but that's another thing that we need to talk about is young people in agriculture, because running out old people. I just heard the other day that by 2033, how many of us old baby boomers are going to be dead and gone, and we're taking with us a pile of knowledge and experience. And our kids, all they've ever do is watch us work night and day. And they go off and get educated, and they get paid every 2 weeks, and they have a pension plan. Why would they come home with cows in March? Who in their right mind would do that?
You're right.
So we've got to get this figured out, or we're not going to have it. Okay, it was hang that up.
That's one of the reasons that we wanted to kind of have a coffee table conversation with the producers. You're exactly right. You've hit the nail on the head, and it's great to hear it. I did have a question. You've talked a lot about soil biology. Can you see a visual difference between the fertility of your land and the land of a neighbor that isn't doing the same type of grazing practices that you're doing, or they're not taking care about soil biology the way that you are?
Let me give that to my wife.
Sure.
Okay, Caitlin, that's a really interesting question, because we've been wondering about this. We've taken a lot of samples over the years, and I've sent them to Cara over in Alberta for analysis of soil biology and so on. It wasn't that promising, but we did that in those dry years. And we didn't have plant growth, and if you don't have plant growth, you don't have much activity in your ground. But after our 2 inches of rain, I had Blaine Jurdis over here. He is a holistic resource fella. He and I went to college 100 years ago at Old, and he's helped me a lot over the years. And we went digging, because he works with Understanding Ag, and he helps a lot of farmers in eastern Saskatchewan. And we went digging in our ground. We don't have layers anymore, Caitlin. And I had a young fellow with us that is a grain farmer that we've been talking about maybe doing something with cocktail crop mixes and so on. And we went digging, and we went and dug in some of his land that he's been continuous cropping for quite a number of years. And we were digging up ours, and we don't have plates in our soil anymore. We're starting to get vertical structure rather than horizontal. And that was very interesting to me because one of the things that we have to do where we live in such a dry climate is that every drop of rain that we get has to go in the ground table. It cannot lay on the surface and evaporate because evaporation is our enemy. And we've got to get water infiltration. And, you know, one of the best plants for breaking through hardpan is kochia. And I spent a fortune trying to get rid of kochia. But the thing that frustrated me about that, every time I turn my cows into a field where there's kochia, what do they go and bite for the first time? And cows aren't stupid. They can select a very high level of nutrition. And I began to think, well, why am I battling kochia so hard when a cow will eat it? Like, it's not a weed anymore. Now it's a forage. And I can't grow kochia on my farm because it hates competition. And it wants cultivated land. So I can't grow kochia anymore. But we have to break up our hardpan that we created with a cultivator. We created hardpan with a cultivator, and that prevents water infiltration. But anyways, when we were digging, we no longer had levels that were horizontal. That was being broken up, and we're getting vertical structure in our soil that allowed air and moisture to more easily enter. Now, I would like a rainfall event of 4 or 5 inches in a day and to see what happens on my land, how much I could infiltrate, because we're always doing water infiltration tests. And when we did some last fall, we were infiltrating an inch of water in 15 minutes. And we keep monitoring these things. Like Gabe Brown says on his farm in North Dakota there, he can infiltrate 8 inches in 1 hour. Well, I would like a test. Whether the good Lord will send us that test or not, I don't know, because the whole country might be floating. But I would like a test on our ground of how much we can infiltrate. When we went to our neighbor's land, the vertical layers were very evident. And we could see even this spring where the newly seeded plants hit the hardpan and their roots started growing horizontally rather than vertically. And there's moisture down there, there's nutrients down there, but we have roots down there to capture that in order to take advantage of it. And yes, we have things called soil rippers and deep rippers and things like that. That is battling Mother Nature again. We're taking a piece of machinery and with our super duper high horsepower tractors now, you can rip and tear it all up like mad and create it all over again by what we're doing. And maybe they can justify that cropping in some areas, but we cannot continue to thrive and survive in our part of the world here doing that. It will not work.
Well, it's really, really interesting.
So yes, we have seen some results. And now that I'm learning a lot more, I'm carrying a shovel a lot more with me to dig, to find out what's going on. And, you know, we have earthworms in our garden because we have put so much organic matter into our garden. And earthworms need organic matter in order to live on. Now, I haven't seen many earthworms in our pasture land. And I don't know in our native pastures, you know, whether there's very much there or not either. I need to go and dig and have a look. But the girl from New Zealand, for the love of soil, forget what her name is, it'll come to me again. He says that in dry environments, in dry, brittle environments, that ants are our earthworms. Nicole Masters is her name. She wrote a book called For the Love of Soil. And she says that in dry environments, ants are our soil, are part of our environmental bugs that are really important. And we have a pile of anthills. When you hit one with a quad in tall grass, you get bounced pretty good. So we have anthills. Now, do we really understand all what's going on? Because they say that earthworms are one of the first things that when your soil starts to change, that really start to appear. because now you have something for them to live on. You have organic matter in your soil and various things like that. So whether I'll see earthworms before the good Lord takes me home or not, I have no idea. But we have a pile of anthills, and as Nicole Master says, she does a pile of work with people in dry Australia. Maybe ants are what more of what we need. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really interesting, very thought-provoking. Um, Art, you've had a lifetime of experience of farming and ranching on the prairies. What's one thing that you're the most proud of with something that you've accomplished?
Well, I suppose it's my family.
Hmm.
Uh, you can be the best farmer or rancher in the world. You can be the best grazer. You can have the finest herd in the world, but if you don't have anybody coming home safe, it's all for naught.
Hmm.
So, to have a son at home now with me and his family, and to have worked with my children, because being home educated, I had 3 meals a day with these children almost their entire lives, and we spent a lot of time working together, talking together, uh, looking at things. And I went to so many seminars and things. We didn't have Zoom in those days, Caitlin. So I went to things, and I took my kids with me, and they were learning with me. And I hope I developed in them a desire to always be a lifelong learner. And I think Leslie and I were accomplished in doing that. And so that, I think, is I'm very grateful. We passed on our faith to our children, and it's their responsibility now to pass on the faith to their children. But it's the love of the land.
Hmm.
It's exciting to work in this environment, Caitlin. And when I moved from Calgary, where the soil was deep and rich and black and had earthworms and it rained relatively consistently, and moved to Frontier, the good Lord knew I needed a good lesson in trusting Him, because this was challenging.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're learning now how to make it thrive. And that's my desire, whether we get 1 inch a year or 20. One year we had 20 inches of rain in this part of the world, Kate. It was amazing what this country will put out. But when it's 1 inch of rain, I want all of that inch of rain to win my ground. I think they teach in ranching for profit that when you get an inch of rain, 1/3 evaporates, 1/3 runs off, and 1/3 soaks in. That's not good enough.
Hmm.
We live in a dry environment, and it's really important that we learn how to preserve absolutely every drop of water. And that's why cover on our ground is so critical, whether it's our native grass or our tame grass. If we take it all,
Yeah.
we're going to suffer. And
Yeah.
after 6 or 7 years of drought, you don't have to try very far to see pastures that have been way overtaxed. It's just too much has been asked of them. And their rate of recovery is going to be a number of years with good rainfall.
Mm-hmm.
Good rainfall.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you have quite a bit of wildlife at your place. What type of wildlife do you see there?
Well, we have a tremendous amount of deer and antelope, because they know where the living is good. When it rains and we have some water, I live right next door to Tate Lake. Okay. And Tate Lake fills up with water once every 50 years. Also, in the 30 years that we've been here, it's been filled twice. And the ducks that we can get is phenomenal. And I remember watching a duck here a couple of years ago when we were mob grazing, and it had a beautiful nest, a bunch of eggs there. And we were mob grazing there, and a cow came up and sniffed that thing, and the duck snapped at its nose. It was absolutely amazing to see. And the thing about mob grazing, it might be pretty hard on some of the game there, but we're only on a very, very small percentage of the farm, Caitlin, at one time. We don't have animals everywhere. So that means there's lots of area left for wildlife. And,
Mhm.
the sage grouse is supposed to be an endangered species. It is an endangered species. They haven't seen one in this part of the world for years and years and years. I don't know whether I'll ever see one. But we put up towers for indigenous hawks. I like shooting gophers, but if I can get a hawk to do them for me, we have 7 or 8 of these towers on our land, and they say that a mating pair of those will take 500 gophers a year. So maybe they do. I don't know. Gophers are a part of the environment too, and they've been horrible for a few years. And when the grass doesn't grow, they say it takes 800 gophers to eat as much as one cow. Uh, it's when it's dry and you're not growing grass and there's a pile of gophers, it's frustrating. And of course, our ground is so full of holes and badger holes and everything. But it's all part of the environment. Will all those holes help me infiltrate 4 or 5 inches of water in an hour? I would think it would help. And so yes, we have lots of game. It's interesting provide habitat for them and to have them on our farm. And but lots and lots of birds. My wife is into birds, and she knows many different kinds of birds. Uh, it's fun to provide an environment for the wildlife.
That's awesome. That's amazing to hear. And I think it's one thing that ranchers don't really get credit for is that, you're doing this grass for your own living, but at the same time, too, in return, you're providing a habitat for wildlife. And it's really amazing. And it's just
It's really,
not given enough credit. Um, in Saskatchewan, wetland drainage is a problem. Do you think that drainage is going to cause more desertification, or is that an issue where you're at?
well, as I say, I'd like to see a few puddles if we got enough moisture. Uh, in order to keep the aquifer that we drink from and water cattle from replenished, I don't want it running down the Missouri River through the Frenchman River Valley. Uh, we don't have a lot of drainage work here. There has been some done in the past, and it's created some hard feelings because water's got to end up somewhere, and it's not on your land. It might be on the neighbors. But and many other places, it's created a lot of hard feelings between neighbors. But it's with an 80-foot air seeder, Caitlin, going around wet spots. But those wet spots are very valuable, and we don't know the value of them because we just see a place that we can't seed with an 80-foot seeder. In our part of the world, drainage isn't a big problem, but I know in many places it is. And it benefits everybody if we have low spots with water in them. They may not last very long, but I think it's just part of something that we need to learn to work with. Of course, you can buy the most exotic machinery now to drain your land and do all sorts of things with. But I think long term, I think we'll be sorry long term if we continue to drain more. And let's let it soak in. Let's let it replenish the aquifer. Yeah, we have to give up some production in order to do that. I don't give up production because eventually my animals will eat every acre, no matter what it is. On drain land, that's a little different story. Land is so expensive now and so on. That's a problem we're going to have that we're going to have to deal with. But you hear about places where they're actually restoring wetlands that have been drained. Somebody's seeing the benefit of it and the need for it. It's just that we have low spots here that they can't see sometimes, but they they don't persist very long, and there's so many years where they farm through them anyway. So it can be an issue. But
And we're kind of running out of time here. It's hard to believe how fast the time has gone. But one final question: what's the best part of your job, and what kind of gets you out of bed every day to keep going and doing what you're doing?
okay, one thing we haven't talked about, Caitlin, is with regenerative agriculture, which is the big
Mhm.
buzzword now, we need livestock.
Mm.
We're running out of cows. Southwest Saskatchewan, our cow numbers are way down. They're way down in North America. Is at 72-year low. We're at 30 or 40-year lows. Uh, how are we going to keep regenerative agriculture going without animals, without livestock, without sheep, without goats, whatever you want to put on it? I don't know. And that's a real concern to me. And, I don't have cows. And so every animal that we have on our ranch is purchased. And we do something which is called sell-by marketing. And that is what has helped us to survive the last number of years. Because I knew I had to learn more about stockmanship, and I knew I had to learn more about marketing. And sell-by marketing is when we are continuously monitoring the markets, and there's markets every week that tell us what is overvalued and what is undervalued. You sell the overvalued and you buy the undervalued. And every pound of gain that we put on, Caitlin, we add a 10% profit. We're not hoping for a profit. We add it on so that when we go and repurchase, we know exactly what we can pay for all different weights of cattle. For example, we sold 760 weight heifers in February, and we've been buying back ever since then. We've replenished the number that we sold, plus we're into what's called a virgin buy now to increase our numbers. So we've bought all the way from about 350 weight to 8 weight, 850 weight. And you say, well, how does that make sense? Well, if you can buy more pounds, when we buy more pounds sometimes than what we sell. If we can buy that animal for less money than what we sold for, now we're buying pounds that people are giving us. We don't have to pay to feed those pounds on, Kate. And this has been I've done it now for 20 years. And it's been quite a study because most ranchers don't like to buy. We'll go and buy some breeding stock, but we don't like to. The feedlots, they're buying all the time. But we have to buy backgrounding calves to background. We have to buy animals to put on grass. And how do you know when to stop bidding? And this is the key of sell-by marketing is price relationship. Something has a value. And every week at the sale, there was a sale in Shaunavon this week that we bought some cattle at. Things have a value. But what is the value to us? And we buy the ones that have value to us because the real value of the animal is too high for us many times. And so I am continually watching the market. And every week, there's many sales every week that tells me what's overvalued and what's undervalued. And so we evaluate our inventory of the animals that we have, and we always have quite a range of weight so that we can be sorting all the time. And when I learned how to properly market, this is revolutionized. And through the 7 years of drought, we always had cattle. We may not have had them here on our farm, but we had them in other places. Because, and we started out talking about with regenerative ag, we have to have livestock. Right now, we're selling cows for a fortune. Cows are selling way above their intrinsic value. I'm advising you right now, don't go and buy a cow for $4,500 because it's way above her intrinsic value. But there's lots of other things if you have $4,500 that you can go and buy that's undervalued that you could add value to. This has been a fascinating study, and it's part of what we need to know other than just grazing and soil biology. How are we going to keep our animals on our farms if regenerative agriculture is supposed to be the big thing we're supposed to be doing now? Like, no-till farming is part of regenerative ag, but it's a very, very, very small part. And everybody's into no-till, and of course, you know, what's going on with our increase in prices and so on. But I got rid of all of my machinery, and we spend as much money as we can right now on purchasing animals. They do two things, Caitlin. They reproduce and they grow. You buy a John Deere tractor and the value of that thing goes down the minute you drive it off the place. Mm-hmm. I don't want to ever have an animal on my farm that's devaluing. It has to be continually increasing in value. And there are so many opportunities with sell-by marketing. And people with cows and calves, they say, well, I couldn't do what you do. They're doing it, Caitlin, because if you sell a calf in the fall, you're buying back money. You may not replace him with another animal, but you're buying back money. But you're also keeping the cow. And I can tell you what you paid for that cow. It's exactly what it cost you to run a cow for 1 year. That's what you paid for that cow. So you sell a calf, and you're buying back the mother. If you keep that mother cow, you're buying her back. And what you're paying for her is what it costs you to run a cow for a year. And if you don't know what it costs to run a cow for a year, you may be a pretty good cowboy that can rope a calf. But if you don't know what your numbers are and what you're doing, and you know, a heifer is the most valuable animal that we have, because there's so many times throughout her lifetime when you can sell her, replace her. You know, you can breed her, you can sell her as a bred heifer, you can sell her as a 3-year-old, you can sell her as a 5-year-old, and maybe you can buy back another cow. Well, the other thing that if we're selling older cows, and right now is not a good time to be selling older cows because of the price of cows, but when you sell an older cow and keep her offspring, supposedly you're buying back an animal that eats less, but yet whose genetics are superior to her mother, if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing genetically. So there's so many ways to look at it as to how to make a living in agriculture, especially with animals. And that's what my passion is right now, to try and share with as many young people as possible how to quit fighting Mother Nature and how to make a living off the land. And it's no better place to raise a family, Kate, than on a farm, on a ranch. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what
Yeah, you did. You know, when I first asked you if you'd be willing to do an interview and as part of our Prairie's Got the Goods week, and I said it'd probably be about 30 minutes. You said, I can't talk that long. Well, it's already been an hour. This has really been amazing. Like, I've been jotting down some notes here about these just amazing and powerful quotes that you've said. It's been really, really beautiful. This is kind of all the time that we have today, but I really want to sincerely thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insight, your lessons learned with us. This has been a really, really good talk that we've had. So thank you, Art.
It's been a pleasure, Caitlin, and I trust that it has prompted some thinking in some of your listeners. And if people want to get in contact with me, they are welcome to do that. I like to encourage people. This is the most wonderful industry in the world that we're into, Caitlin, but we got to get it figured out how to make a living at it and how to make a good living, and an incredible place to raise children. So I'm always happy to visit with people, and my son now, he's learned a lot. He's joined a group with Donovan that are doing a lot of regenerative things, and he's now on the speaking tour because I gotta pass the baton on to him on those areas too.
That's good to know. But this one was about learning from you. But maybe we'll have your son on it next time. It'd be great to hear from him too. So thank you again, Art. And there's been lots of people that have typed in. Thank you. It's always a joy listening and learning from you, and how much they appreciate your talk. So thank you so much. And with that, to all of our listeners out there, thanks for catching today's coffee table conversation, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. And we'll have this uploaded to YouTube in the near future, so you can pass this information on to someone who may have missed it. So thanks
Thank you,
so
Caitlin,
much.
for
Have a great evening. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye bye.